Sarah Martinez had been home from her third deployment for exactly 47 days. She counted each one because the quiet suburban streets of San Diego still felt foreign, after years of desert compounds and military bases overseas. The Navy SEAL had traded her tactical gear for civilian clothes, but the instincts never left. She noticed everything: the way shadows fell differently at sunset, which cars had been parked on her street for too long, and how the mailman always approached from the same angle every Tuesday at 2:15. That Tuesday started like any other. Sarah woke at 0500, completed her morning workout routine in the garage gym she'd built, and prepared for another day of mandatory counseling sessions and paperwork. The Navy wanted to make sure she was adjusting properly to civilian life. What they didn't understand was that for someone like Sarah, there was no such thing as truly civilian life. The warrior mindset didn't have an off switch. At 10:30, she drove to the VA office for her weekly session with Dr. Rebecca Chen. The psychiatrist was kind and patient, but Sarah could see the concern in her eyes during their conversations. Dr. Chen worried about Sarah's isolation, her reluctance to discuss certain missions, and what she called hypervigilance. "Have you considered reaching out to other veterans in the community?" Dr. Chen asked during their session. "There are support groups, social events. It might help to connect with people who understand what you've experienced." Sarah nodded politely but said little. How could she explain that every crowded room felt like a potential threat zone? That she automatically mapped exit routes wherever she went? That the sound of helicopters overhead still made her reach for weapons that weren't there? After the appointment, Sarah stopped at the grocery store. She moved efficiently through the aisles, selecting items with the same precision she once used to plan military operations. As she reached for a box of cereal, she noticed a man in a baseball cap watching her from the end of the aisle. When she moved to the next aisle, he followed. The third time it happened, Sarah's training kicked in. She paid for her groceries and walked calmly to her truck, checking her mirrors as she drove home. The blue sedan followed her for 6 blocks before turning away. Sarah made a mental note of the license plate and the driver's appearance: average height, brown jacket, nervous energy. Her instincts told her this wasn't random. That evening, Sarah sat on her back porch cleaning her personal sidearm, a Glock 19 she kept for home protection. The ritual was meditative, each motion practiced and precise. As darkness fell, she noticed lights in the house across the street that had been empty for months. Someone had moved in, but she hadn't seen any moving trucks or real estate signs. Around midnight, Sarah woke to the sound of her security system's motion detector. She'd installed military-grade equipment throughout her property. Sensors that could distinguish between a cat and a human footstep. Someone was moving around her backyard. Without turning on any lights, Sarah slipped out of bed and retrieved her weapon. She moved through her house like smoke, using techniques learned in urban warfare training. Through the kitchen window, she spotted 2 figures near her garage. They wore dark clothing and moved with purpose, not like random burglars looking for quick targets. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Was this connected to her military service? She'd made enemies during her tours overseas, but intelligence suggested most threats had been neutralized. Could this be related to classified operations she'd been involved in? Or was this something more personal? She activated the silent alarm that would alert local police, then prepared to defend her home. The figures split up. One moved toward the front of the house while the other headed for the back door. This was coordinated, professional. These weren't ordinary criminals. The back door handle turned slowly. Sarah positioned herself behind the kitchen island, weapon ready. Her heart rate remained steady, breathing controlled. Years of training had prepared her for exactly this moment. The door opened silently and a shadow slipped inside. "Federal agents," a voice whispered into a radio. "Target is awake and armed." Federal agents? Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't a home invasion, this was an operation. But why would federal agents be conducting an unauthorized entry on a decorated Navy SEAL? Her service record was exemplary. She'd never been involved in anything that would warrant this kind of attention. The intruder moved deeper into her house, unaware that Sarah was tracking his every step. She could take him down in seconds, but attacking federal agents would create problems she couldn't solve with force. Instead, she remained hidden and listened. "Kitchen's clear," the voice reported, moving to bedroom level. Sarah slipped out through the front door and circled around to her truck. Her phone showed missed calls from an unknown number. As she debated whether to answer, headlights appeared at the end of her street. 3 black SUVs approached her house, moving fast but without sirens. Something was very wrong. Legitimate federal operations didn't happen like this, especially not against decorated military personnel without warning or warrants. Sarah's mind cycled through everything she knew about illegal government operations, rogue agents, and private military contractors who sometimes operated outside official channels. She started her truck and drove toward the main road, keeping her lights off until she was several blocks away. In her rearview mirror, she watched the SUVs surround her house. Men in tactical gear emerged and took positions around the property. Sarah drove to a 24-hour diner across town and parked where she could watch the entrance. She needed to think, to figure out who was after her and why. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Your life depends on it. Pier 47, 1 hour. Come alone." The message could be a trap, but staying hidden wasn't an option anymore. Someone had orchestrated a sophisticated operation against her, using resources and intelligence that suggested government involvement. Sarah had to assume her communications were compromised, her bank accounts monitored, and her known associates under surveillance. She thought about her time overseas, the classified missions, the people she'd worked with and against. Something from her past had caught up with her, but she couldn't identify what or who. The only way forward was to meet this unknown contact and hope to get answers before whoever was hunting her decided to stop playing games and finish whatever they'd started. Sarah checked her weapon one more time and headed toward the pier, knowing she was walking into unknown danger, but having no other choice. Pier 47 stretched into the dark Pacific like a skeletal finger, pointing toward an uncertain horizon. Sarah arrived 30 minutes early and positioned herself where she could observe the entire area. The fog rolled in from the ocean, creating perfect cover but also limiting visibility. She counted 4 potential escape routes and identified several defensive positions among the pier's wooden support pillars. At exactly the appointed time, a lone figure emerged from the mist. Sarah watched through night vision scope as a woman in her 50s approached slowly, hands visible, no obvious weapons. The stranger wore a long coat and walked with the measured pace of someone trying not to appear threatening. "Sarah Martinez," the woman called out when she was still 50 feet away. "My name is Agent Patricia Russo, formerly with the Defense Intelligence Agency. I need you to listen very carefully because both our lives are in danger." Sarah kept her weapon ready but remained hidden behind a shipping container. "Start talking," she called back. "And explain why federal agents just raided my house." "Those weren't federal agents," Russo replied, continuing her slow approach. "They were private contractors working for someone who wants you dead. I've been trying to warn you for weeks, but your communications are being monitored." "Monitored by who? And why should I trust you?" Agent Russo stopped about 20 feet away and slowly reached into her coat. Sarah tensed, ready to fire, but the woman pulled out a tablet device. "Because I have proof of what's really happening. And because I'm the only person who can help you survive the next 24 hours. The tablet screen glowed in the darkness, displaying what appeared to be classified documents. Sarah moved closer, keeping her weapon trained on Russo while trying to read the information. What she saw made her blood freeze. "Operation Nightfall," she whispered, recognizing code names and mission details from her last deployment overseas. "This is classified. How did you get these files?" "I was the intelligence officer who briefed your team before that mission in Afghanistan," Russo explained. "The one where you eliminated Ahmad Hassan and his entire network. What you weren't told is that Hassan was working as a double agent for the CIA. His death exposed an ongoing operation that had taken years to establish." Sarah's mind raced back to that night 8 months ago. Her team had received solid intelligence about a terrorist cell planning attacks on American interests. The mission had been textbook: infiltrate, eliminate, extract. Hassan and 6 of his associates had been neutralized without civilian casualties or American losses. It had been considered a complete success. "You're saying we killed someone who was working for us?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Not intentionally. Hassan had been feeding information to the CIA for 2 years, helping prevent dozens of attacks. But someone wanted him dead and used your team to do it. The question is who gave the order and why." Russo swiped to another screen showing financial records and communication logs. After Hassan's death, $50 million in frozen terrorist assets mysteriously disappeared from government accounts. The money was transferred through shell companies and offshore banks. Someone used that mission as cover for the biggest theft in intelligence history. Sarah studied the documents, her training allowing her to quickly assess their authenticity. The classification levels, formatting, and specific details all appeared genuine, but trusting anyone at this point felt like a mistake that could get her killed. Assuming this is real, what does it have to do with me now? I followed orders and completed the mission as briefed. Because you're the only surviving member of your team, Russo said quietly. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. What are you talking about? My team made it out clean. Lieutenant Commander Jackson died in a car accident 3 weeks after returning stateside. Petty Officer Williams was killed in what appeared to be a random mugging. Chief Martinez suffered a heart attack during routine training, and Seaman Brooks died in a climbing accident, all within 6 months of the mission. Sarah's hands shook as she processed this information. Her teammates, her brothers in arms, all dead. Men she'd served with for years, trained with, trusted with her life. The coincidence was impossible. Someone had systematically eliminated her entire unit. You're the last one, Russo continued. And now they're coming for you. Who's they? Give me names. That's what I've been trying to figure out. The money trail leads to several defense contractors and private intelligence firms, but the real puppet master is hidden behind layers of shell companies and false identities. What I do know is that they have resources, government contacts, and the ability to make people disappear. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. She looked at Russo, who nodded grimly. Answer it. Put it on speaker. Sarah accepted the call. A digitally altered voice spoke through the phone's speaker. Ms. Martinez, I hope you're enjoying your conversation with Agent Russo. Unfortunately, it will be your last. Red laser dots appeared on both women's chests, barely visible in the fog but unmistakable to trained eyes. Sniper positions on surrounding buildings and boats in the harbor. They were completely exposed, surrounded by an unknown number of professional killers. Here's what's going to happen, the voice continued. You're going to walk to the end of the pier where a boat is waiting. Come quietly and Agent Russo lives. Resist and we kill you both right now. Sarah evaluated their tactical situation in seconds. Multiple sniper positions, unknown number of hostiles, limited cover, no backup. In most circumstances, this would be considered an impossible scenario. But Sarah Martinez wasn't most people. You made one mistake, Sarah said into the phone, her voice calm and steady. And what's that? You assumed I came here alone. Sarah triggered a small device on her belt, sending a signal to explosive charges she'd planted around the pier during her early reconnaissance. The charges weren't meant to kill. They were meant to create chaos. Smoke and debris erupted from 4 locations, instantly obscuring the entire area in thick, choking clouds. Move! Sarah grabbed Russo and pulled her toward the water as sniper rounds cracked through the air, where they'd been standing moments before. The fog and artificial smoke created perfect concealment, but it wouldn't last long. They reached the edge of the pier as searchlights began cutting through the smoke. Sarah could hear boots on wooden planks, tactical teams moving to surround their position. The water below was 30 feet down, black and cold, but it represented their only escape route. Can you swim? Sarah asked Russo. Not well enough for this. Then hold your breath and trust me. Sarah wrapped her arm around the agent and jumped. They hit the freezing Pacific water hard, the impact driving air from their lungs. Sarah immediately swam deeper, pulling Russo down with her as bullets sparked off the water's surface above them. Using combat swimming techniques learned in SEAL training, Sarah navigated underwater toward the harbor's edge. Her lungs burned and Russo was struggling, but they had to stay submerged until they reached the maze of dock pilings that would provide cover. When they finally surfaced behind a fishing boat, both women gasped for air. Russo was shivering violently but alive. Sarah scanned their surroundings, listening for pursuit. Voices shouted orders in the distance, but the search seemed focused on the pier area. We need to move, Sarah whispered. They'll expand the search perimeter soon. Where can we go? They have resources everywhere. Sarah thought about safe houses, friendly contacts, and secure locations. But if this conspiracy reached into government agencies and defense contractors, nowhere was truly safe. They needed allies, but more importantly, they needed to identify who was behind the murders and theft. First, we need to dry off and find transportation. Then we're going to do something they won't expect. What's that? We're going hunting. The abandoned warehouse in Tijuana smelled of rust and old motor oil, but it was off the grid and far from American surveillance networks. Sarah had driven them across the border using routes she'd learned from intelligence contacts, avoiding cameras and checkpoints. Agent Russo sat on a crate, warming her hands around a cup of coffee Sarah had bought from a street vendor. "Tell me everything about the money," Sarah said, studying the documents they'd managed to save from their escape. "$50 million doesn't just disappear without leaving traces." Russo pulled up financial records on her tablet, which had survived their underwater adventure in a waterproof case. The theft happened in stages over 6 months. Small transfers disguised as routine operational expenses. Whoever did this understood government accounting systems and had access to classified budgets. Inside job. Has to be. The security clearances alone would eliminate 90% of potential suspects. We're looking at senior intelligence officials, defense contractors with government access, or someone high up in the Pentagon. Sarah examined transaction records, noting patterns in the timing and amounts. Her military training had included financial intelligence gathering, skills that proved useful now. These transfers correspond with mission reports from my unit. Every time we completed an operation, money moved. Your missions were providing cover for the theft, Russo agreed. Successful operations create budget movements, equipment replacements, mission funding adjustments. Perfect opportunities to hide financial irregularities. But why kill my team? The mission was over. The money was gone. Why not just let us return to normal duty? Russo's expression darkened. Because Ahmad Hassan left something behind before he died. A laptop with encrypted files that contained evidence of the double-agent operation. If anyone analyzed those files carefully, they'd discover he was working for the CIA. Sarah remembered the laptop. Standard procedure was to collect all electronic devices during raids for intelligence analysis. Her team had recovered Hassan's personal computer along with phones, hard drives, and communication equipment. Everything had been turned over to intelligence analysts for processing. Who had access to Hassan's laptop? That's the problem. The chain of custody shows it was processed by multiple agencies: CIA, NSA, Defense Intelligence, and at least 3 private contractors. Any one of them could have discovered Hassan's true identity and realized they'd been exposed. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number again, but this time the message was different. Check the news. Your face is everywhere. 72 hours. She turned on a small radio they'd bought and scanned news stations until she found an English broadcast. The reporter's voice was clear and urgent. Federal authorities have issued a nationwide manhunt for former Navy SEAL Sarah Martinez, wanted in connection with the murders of federal agents and theft of classified materials. Martinez is considered armed and extremely dangerous. They're framing me, Sarah said, her voice tight with controlled fury, making me the scapegoat for everything. It's brilliant from their perspective, Russo admitted. A decorated soldier gone rogue, stealing money and killing agents. The media will eat it up, and any investigation will focus on you instead of the real criminals. 72 hours means they're planning something big. After that, it won't matter if we prove my innocence. Sarah's military mind began working through scenarios. In 3 days, the people behind this conspiracy would complete whatever they'd started: the money theft, her team's murders, and now framing her. It was all building towards something larger. We need to identify the main target, she said. Someone with access, motive, and resources. Who benefited most from Hassan's death and the money theft? Russo scrolled through personnel files on her tablet. I've been analyzing everyone who had access to the mission planning and Hassan's intelligence. There are 12 people who could have orchestrated this. Show me. The list included CIA directors, Pentagon officials, and executives from major defense contractors. Sarah recognized several names from classified briefings and mission reports. These were powerful people with the ability to influence operations and control information flow. Wait, Sarah said, studying one particular file. General Marcus Webb, he was the operational commander who approved our mission parameters. Webb retired 4 months ago and immediately joined Blackstone Security as their new CEO. Blackstone has contracts worth billions with the Defense Department. Sarah remembered General Webb from several briefings, a career military officer with an outstanding record, but also someone who'd expressed frustration with government bureaucracy and budget limitations. If he'd discovered an opportunity to acquire $50 million in untraceable funds, Blackstone Security, Sarah repeated. That name appeared in the financial records you showed me. They're one of the shell companies that received transferred funds. But proving Webb is behind this will require more than circumstantial evidence. A new plan began forming in Sarah's mind. Direct confrontation was impossible. Webb had too many resources and protections. But there was another way, one that used her specialized training and knowledge of his weaknesses. Webb collects military artifacts, Sarah said, remembering details from intelligence files. He has a private museum in his home outside Washington, D.C. Weapons, uniforms, documents from wars throughout history. How does that help us? Because collectors keep detailed records of their acquisitions. If Webb used stolen money to purchase expensive items, there will be evidence in his personal files. Financial records, transaction histories, communications with dealers. You're talking about breaking into a general's home. That's suicide, not breaking in. Walking in. Sarah pulled out her phone and began researching Webb's social calendar. He hosts monthly gatherings for other collectors and military historians. Tomorrow night he's having a special event featuring artifacts from recent overseas operations. Russo stared at her. You want to attend a party thrown by the man who's trying to kill you? I want to get close enough to access his private files while he's distracted playing host. Webb knows my face, but he doesn't know I'm aware of his involvement. If I can maintain cover long enough to gather evidence, it's insane. Even if you could somehow get inside, what makes you think he hasn't prepared for this possibility? Sarah considered the question carefully. Webb was military trained, experienced in operational security, and definitely aware that she'd escaped his initial elimination attempt. But he was also arrogant, confident in his power and resources. Men like Webb often underestimated opponents they considered beneath them. Because he thinks he's already won, Sarah said finally. The manhunt, the media coverage, the framing. From his perspective, I'm a desperate fugitive with nowhere to run. He won't expect me to walk into his home. And if you're wrong, then at least we'll have answers before we die. Russo was quiet for several minutes, studying the intelligence files and Sarah's growing plan. Finally, she nodded. I have contacts who can provide documentation and equipment, fake identification, appropriate clothing, technical gear for accessing computer systems. What about backup? If this goes wrong, I'll need extraction options. I can position myself nearby with communications equipment and an escape vehicle. Not much, but better than going in alone. Sarah felt the familiar calm that came before dangerous operations. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd done successfully dozens of times overseas. The stakes were personal now, but the skills remained the same. 24 hours to prepare, she said. We get one chance at this, so everything has to be perfect. Outside the warehouse, the Mexican sun was setting, painting the sky red like blood. Sarah watched the horizon and thought about her dead teammates, wondering if they'd known death was coming or if they'd been taken by surprise. Tomorrow night she'd have answers, or she'd join them. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the Navy SEAL who'd escaped from Pier 47. Professional makeup had softened Sarah's angular features, and her hair was now auburn instead of military short brown. The elegant black dress and expensive jewelry suggested old money and social connections. According to her forged identification, she was Dr. Elizabeth Camden, a military historian from Georgetown University specializing in modern warfare artifacts. The documentation is flawless, Russo said, adjusting the tiny camera hidden in Sarah's necklace. Birth records, education history, professional credentials, everything checks out under normal scrutiny. Define normal. Surface-level background checks, casual verification. If Webb's security team does deep research, they'll find inconsistencies within 6 hours. Sarah tested the miniature communication device fitted like a hearing aid. Russo's voice came through clearly from across the motel room. Audio is good. Remember, I'll be monitoring from a van 3 blocks away. The signal has a 2-mile range, but thick walls and electronic interference can cause problems. Worst case scenario, I'm on my own after I get inside. Try not to let it come to that. They drove separately toward Webb's estate in the Virginia countryside, Sarah following GPS directions while memorizing escape routes and potential safe houses. The property occupied 200 acres of rolling hills and forests, isolated enough to provide privacy, but close enough to Washington for convenient access to Pentagon meetings. The main house was a colonial mansion built in the 1800s, recently renovated with modern security systems and amenities. Sarah counted cameras, motion sensors, and guard positions as she approached the main gate. Professional security, but designed more for privacy than defense against serious threats. Dr. Camden, the gate guard said, consulting his guest list. "Welcome to General Webb's collection evening. Please proceed to the main house." Sarah drove up the winding driveway, noting sight lines and defensive positions from habit. Other vehicles were already parked near the mansion. Expensive cars, belonging to collectors, historians, and military officials. Perfect cover for blending into the crowd. General Webb greeted guests personally at the front door, and Sarah's breath caught when she saw him in person. Tall and distinguished, wearing dress uniform with ribbons and decorations from 30 years of service. This was the man who'd ordered her teammates murdered, who'd stolen $50 million and who'd tried to have her killed. "Dr. Camden," Webb said warmly, shaking her hand. "I've read your articles on battlefield archaeology. Fascinating work. Thank you, General. I'm particularly interested in how artifacts from recent conflicts compare to historical pieces. Then you'll appreciate tonight's display. We have items from Afghanistan and Iraq alongside Civil War and World War II pieces. The evolution of warfare technology is remarkable." Sarah allowed herself to be led into the main hall, where display cases lined the walls. Weapons, uniforms, documents, and personal items from soldiers throughout history. She recognized some pieces from her own deployments, wondering how Webb had acquired them. "The centerpiece tonight," Webb announced to the gathering crowd, "is this laptop computer recovered from a terrorist compound in Afghanistan. It may not look like much, but the intelligence gathered from this device prevented dozens of attacks and saved countless lives." Sarah stared at the laptop in its glass case. Ahmad Hassan's computer, the one her team had recovered during the mission that started everything. Webb was displaying it like a trophy, completely unaware that his prize evidence could also prove his guilt. "Excuse me," she said to a nearby guest. "I need to find the restroom." Sarah moved casually through the house, memorizing the layout while looking for Webb's private office. The mansion had multiple levels and wings, with guest areas on the main floor and private quarters above. Security cameras covered main hallways but not service corridors or utility areas. She found what she was looking for on the second floor, a heavy wooden door marked Private Study. Basic electronic lock, probably connected to the main security system. Sarah pulled out a small device Russo had provided, a military-grade lockpick that could defeat most civilian security. The lock clicked open after 30 seconds. Sarah slipped inside and closed the door behind her, immediately moving to the computer on Webb's desk. The machine was password protected, but she'd come prepared for that too. "I'm in," she whispered to Russo through her communication device. "Accessing files now." The computer hack tool worked quickly, bypassing security and revealing Webb's personal files. Sarah found what she was looking for in a folder marked Private Acquisitions. Detailed records of expensive purchases made over the past 8 months. Weapons, artifacts, rare books, all bought with cash transactions that matched the timing of the stolen government funds. But the real evidence was in Webb's personal communications, encrypted emails with defense contractors discussing operational security and asset elimination, references to her teammates by name, with confirmation of their deaths, and most damning of all, recorded phone conversations discussing the Hassan mission and the need to clean up loose ends. "Got it," Sarah whispered, copying files to a portable drive. "Audio recordings, financial records, everything we need to prove." The door opened behind her. Sarah spun around to find General Webb standing in the doorway, no longer the gracious host from downstairs. His hand rested on the butt of a service pistol holstered under his dress jacket. "Dr. Elizabeth Camden," he said quietly. "Or should I say, Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez, United States Navy SEALs." Sarah's hand moved toward her own concealed weapon, but Webb shook his head. "I wouldn't recommend it. There are 12 armed men positioned throughout this house, and your friend in the van has already been neutralized." "Russo?" "Agent Russo is unharmed, but secured, just like you will be, once we finish our conversation." Webb stepped into the office and closed the door. "I must admit I'm impressed. Most people would have fled the country or gone into hiding, but you decided to come straight to the source. I wanted answers, and now you have them. The question is, what happens next? Sarah evaluated her tactical situation. Webb was armed and confident, but also talking instead of shooting. That suggested he wanted something from her, which meant she still had leverage. You killed my teammates, she said. Good men who served their country faithfully. I eliminated security threats. Your team stumbled onto an operation years in the making. Hassan's death was necessary to protect ongoing intelligence activities. Ongoing theft, you mean? Webb's expression hardened. The money finances operations that Congress won't approve and the public won't support. Sometimes democracy is too slow for national security requirements. So you decided to fund your own private war? I decided to ensure America's interests are protected regardless of political changes or budget limitations. The $50 million was just the beginning. Sarah understood now. This wasn't about personal greed. It was about power and control. Webb believed he was serving his country by operating outside legal restrictions, using stolen funds to finance off-the-books operations. The laptop downstairs, she said. Hassan's computer. It contains evidence of the CIA operation you destroyed. It contains what I want it to contain. Modified files, altered communications, false evidence that supports the official story. Hassan was a terrorist, your team eliminated, a legitimate threat. And I'm a patriot who collects historical artifacts. People will discover the truth eventually. No, they won't, because you're going to disappear just like your teammates. Another tragic accident, another fallen hero who couldn't adjust to civilian life. Webb drew his pistol and pointed it at Sarah's head. Stand up slowly and move toward the window. Sarah rose from the desk chair, the portable drive still in her hand. Everything depended on the next few seconds, on whether her years of training would be enough to overcome impossible odds. Before, you kill me, she said. There's something you should know. What's that? I didn't come here alone. Webb's eyes narrowed, but his pistol remained steady. Agent Russo is neutralized and my security team swept the perimeter. You're bluffing. Am I? Sarah smiled grimly. You made the same mistake with my teammates. You assumed they were isolated, that no one else knew what they'd discovered. Your teammates didn't discover anything. They followed orders and completed their mission. Lieutenant Commander Jackson found inconsistencies in the mission briefing materials. He was researching Hassan's background when he died. Petty Officer Williams noticed irregularities in the equipment manifests and started asking questions. Chief Martinez was tracking ammunition expenditures that didn't match official reports. Webb's confident expression wavered slightly. Impossible. Our intelligence showed no evidence of suspicion or investigation, because they were smart enough to conduct their research off the books. They knew someone was watching, so they used personal resources and unofficial channels. Sarah took a half-step closer. They also knew enough to create insurance policies. What kind of insurance? Recorded statements. Detailed documentation. Evidence packages prepared for posthumous delivery if anything happened to them. Sarah was lying, but Webb couldn't be certain. Military personnel often created contingency plans for classified information, especially when they suspected corruption or cover-ups. The possibility that her dead teammates had left behind evidence would terrify someone in Webb's position. Where are these supposed evidence packages? Safe deposit boxes, trusted friends, lawyers with instructions. The usual places smart soldiers hide things when they're worried about their safety. Webb's gun hand trembled slightly. You're lying. Maybe, but can you afford to take that chance? How many people have access to those packages? How many investigations will start if I disappear tonight? The truth was that Sarah had no idea if her teammates had suspected anything before their deaths. But she could see doubt creeping into Webb's eyes, uncertainty about how much evidence might still exist beyond his control. Besides, Sarah continued, I wasn't talking about Russo or my dead teammates. Then who? The people who've been watching you for months, gathering evidence of your activities. The people who helped me identify you as the source of the conspiracy? Webb's face went pale. What people? Did you really think $50 million could disappear from government accounts without anyone noticing? That decorated soldiers could die in accidents without triggering investigations? You're not the only one with intelligence contacts and resources. Sarah was building her deception carefully, using Webb's paranoia against him. Men in his position lived in constant fear of exposure, always worried about enemies and rivals who might destroy them. Internal Affairs has been building a case, she lied smoothly. They needed someone on the inside, someone with the skills to get close to you and gather final proof. You're working for Internal Affairs? I'm working for justice, for my teammates who died because you couldn't steal money without covering your tracks. Webb's gun wavered as he processed this information. If Internal Affairs was investigating, if other government agencies were involved, then killing Sarah might only accelerate his exposure rather than prevent it. The laptop downstairs. Sarah pressed her advantage. Hassan's real computer is in government custody. The one you're displaying is a fake, created to support your cover story, but forensic analysis will prove it's been tampered with. That's impossible. Computer forensics have advanced significantly in recent years. Memory recovery, deleted file reconstruction, timeline analysis. They can prove when files were created and modified. Your fake evidence will actually become evidence of your guilt. Webb lowered his weapon slightly, uncertainty replacing confidence. What do you want? A confession. Full disclosure of your activities, the names of your accomplices, and the location of the stolen funds. In exchange for what? A chance to surrender quietly instead of being arrested publicly. A plea bargain instead of life in prison or execution for treason. Webb stared at her for long seconds, weighing his options. Sarah could see him calculating odds, considering scenarios, trying to determine if cooperation might save him from complete destruction. How do I know you won't just kill me once you have what you want? Because I'm not you. I don't murder people to cover up crimes. A soft beeping sound came from Webb's desk computer. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. Someone's accessing my files remotely, Sarah smiled. Insurance policy. If I don't check in every 30 minutes, everything on your computer gets automatically uploaded to multiple government agencies and news organizations. That's impossible. This system is secured. Military-grade encryption is meaningless when you have the right equipment and training. Did you think Navy SEALs only learn how to shoot people? Webb's world was collapsing around him, and Sarah could see panic replacing his earlier confidence. Men like him were dangerous when cornered, but they were also predictable. Fear made them desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. You have 29 minutes, Sarah said, checking her watch. After that, everything goes public whether you cooperate or not. I need guarantees, written agreements about plea bargains and sentencing recommendations. You need to start talking before your time runs out. Webb moved to his desk and opened a locked drawer, pulling out a thick folder. Financial records, operation details, personnel involved. Everything is documented here. Start with the money. Where did it go? Offshore accounts, shell companies, equipment purchases for off-books operations. I can provide account numbers and access codes. What operations? Intelligence gathering in regions where official presence was politically impossible. Asset recruitment, information purchase. Small-scale tactical actions. Sarah recognized the description of activities that straddled the line between legitimate intelligence work and private military contracting. Who else was involved? Defense contractors, retired intelligence officials, active duty personnel in key positions. About 30 people total. Names. Webb began reading from a list, and Sarah recognized several high-ranking officials from different agencies. This conspiracy reached deeper into the government than she'd imagined, involving people with the power to influence policy and operations at the highest levels. My teammates discovered this network. Lieutenant Commander Jackson identified unusual communication patterns between agencies. He was getting close to connecting financial irregularities with operational anomalies. So you had him killed. I protected national security interests by eliminating a threat to ongoing operations. You murdered an American serviceman to cover up theft. Webb's face hardened. I did what was necessary to preserve capabilities that keep this country safe. The computer beeped again, indicating another file transfer. Webb looked at the screen with growing alarm. How much are they copying? Everything. Financial records, communications, operational details, personnel files. By tomorrow morning, investigators will have complete documentation of your activities. This will destroy legitimate intelligence operations. Assets will be compromised. Operations will be exposed. People will die. People are already dying. My teammates, anyone who gets too close to the truth. The only difference is that now there will be consequences. Webb slumped in his chair, the weight of his situation finally hitting him. What happens now? Now you're going to call your security team and tell them to stand down. Then we're going to walk downstairs together, and you're going to announce to your guests that the party is over. And then? Then you turn yourself into federal authorities and hope they're more merciful than you were to my teammates. Webb reached for his phone, but instead of calling his security team, he hit a panic button hidden under his desk. Alarms began blaring throughout the house, and Sarah heard running footsteps in the hallway outside. You made a mistake, Webb said, raising his pistol again. I'd rather face federal charges than let you destroy everything I've built. And you made a bigger one, Sarah replied calmly. The office windows exploded inward as tactical teams rappelled through the glass. Federal agents in full combat gear surrounded Webb, automatic weapons trained on him from multiple angles. FBI. Drop your weapon! Webb's gun clattered to the floor as he raised his hands in surrender. Sarah stepped back as agents moved to secure him, her heart racing but her expression calm. Agent Martinez, the team leader said, removing his helmet. Are you injured? I'm fine. The evidence is on the computer and in that folder. Everything you need to prosecute him and his network. As Webb was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Sarah. This isn't over. There are others, people with more power and resources than you can imagine. Then we'll find them too. Sarah watched through the broken windows as federal vehicles surrounded the mansion. The guests had been evacuated, and Webb's security team was being questioned by investigators. After months of running and hiding, it was finally over. But as she walked downstairs past the display cases filled with military artifacts, Sarah thought about Webb's final words. The conspiracy had involved 30 people, according to his records. Tonight they'd captured one man, but the network he'd described was still out there, still dangerous. Her personal war might be ending, but the larger battle for justice was just beginning. 6 months later, Sarah stood in Arlington National Cemetery watching honor guards fold the American flag over Lieutenant Commander Jackson's grave. The military funeral was long overdue, but his family finally had the truth about his death and the recognition he deserved. Similar ceremonies had been held for her other teammates, each one a small step toward justice. The trials had dominated headlines for weeks. General Webb pleaded guilty to conspiracy, theft of government funds, and multiple counts of murder in exchange for cooperation with federal investigators. His testimony led to arrests across the intelligence community, defense contractors, and private military companies. The network of corruption had reached even higher than Sarah had imagined. The president wants to meet with you, Agent Russo said, approaching across the cemetery grounds. She'd been promoted to head a new task force investigating intelligence corruption, using evidence from Webb's case to identify similar conspiracies throughout the government. I'm not much for politicians, Sarah replied, placing white roses on Jackson's grave. This isn't political. There's something you need to know about the larger situation. Sarah followed Russo to a black SUV parked near the cemetery entrance. Inside, a secure communication system connected them to a briefing room in Washington, where senior officials were discussing classified matters. Agent Martinez, the familiar voice of the FBI director, came through the speakers. Your work exposing the Webb conspiracy has revealed a much larger problem. We've identified similar theft operations in at least 6 other agencies, involving hundreds of millions in government funds. How is that possible? Webb's network was one cell in a larger organization. They call themselves the Patriot Fund, a shadow group that believes American interests require operations outside legal oversight. They've been active for over a decade. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The people Webb mentioned before his arrest. Exactly. Using his records and testimony, we've identified key figures in this organization. But we have a problem. A new voice joined the conversation, someone Sarah didn't recognize. Most of these people hold positions that make traditional investigation impossible. Senators, federal judges, cabinet officials, military leaders. Normal law enforcement approaches would trigger political crises. What are you asking me to do? We're asking you to consider a special assignment, the FBI director said. A small elite team operating under deep cover to gather evidence against targets who are otherwise untouchable. You want me to spy on my own government? We want you to save it. The Patriot Fund has compromised democratic institutions at the highest levels. Without intervention, they'll continue stealing public resources and eliminating anyone who threatens their operations. Sarah thought about her dead teammates, about Webb's arrogant justification for murder, about the dozens of other victims who died to protect these conspiracies. What kind of team? Former special operations personnel, intelligence specialists, people with skills and experience but no official connections that could be traced back to government agencies. You'd have resources and support, but complete operational independence. And if we're discovered? You'll be disavowed and prosecuted as rogue agents. The familiar weight of dangerous responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd dedicated her life to achieving. Not glory or recognition, but the hard, thankless work of protecting people who would never know her name. How many people are we talking about? The core leadership includes 12 individuals: senators, intelligence directors, defense contractors, federal judges. Each one has extensive security and legal protections. 12 targets. Sarah calculated the operational requirements in her head. That's a minimum 2-year commitment, probably longer. Are you interested? Sarah looked out the SUV window at Arlington's endless rows of white headstones, each one representing someone who died serving their country. Some had fallen in foreign wars. Others had been murdered by the very people they'd sworn to protect. I'll need to select my own team members. Approved. Complete operational autonomy. No interference. No second guessing. No political considerations. Agreed. And when this is over, I want out. No more assignments. No more requests for special favors. Understood. Sarah made her decision. When do we start? 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in a nondescript office building outside Washington, reviewing personnel files for potential team members. Former Navy SEALs, Delta Force operators, CIA field agents, people whose careers had been ended by the same corruption she was now fighting. Her first recruit was Master Sergeant David Chen, a former Army Ranger whose unit had been disbanded after they discovered their commanding officer was selling weapons to insurgents. The second was Maria Santos, a former CIA operative who'd been blacklisted for refusing to participate in an assassination that would have benefited defense contractors. Together they began planning operations against targets who believed themselves untouchable. Senator Patricia Williams, who'd used classified defense information to make millions in stock trades. Federal Judge Robert Morrison, who'd dismissed cases against corrupt contractors in exchange for bribes. CIA Director Thomas Bradley, who'd been selling intelligence to foreign governments through private intermediaries. Each target required months of surveillance, careful planning, and precise execution. They couldn't simply gather evidence and turn it over to authorities. Too many officials were compromised. Instead, they had to create situations where the targets exposed themselves publicly, forcing investigations that couldn't be suppressed. The work was dangerous and isolating. Sarah's team operated in complete secrecy, with minimal contact even between themselves. They used false identities, moved frequently, and trusted no one outside their small circle. But slowly, methodically, they began achieving results. Senator Williams was arrested after her stock trades were exposed by anonymous leaks to financial journalists. Judge Morrison resigned in disgrace when recordings of bribe negotiations appeared on news websites. CIA Director Bradley suffered a fatal heart attack the night before scheduled testimony about his foreign contacts. 12 targets, Sarah said to herself, crossing another name off her list. 9 to go. The remaining members of the Patriot Fund were more careful now, aware that someone was hunting them. They'd increased security, changed their communication methods, and become suspicious of anyone who approached them. But they'd also become desperate, which made them unpredictable and dangerous. Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Agent Russo. They know about your team. Extraction recommended. Sarah deleted the message without responding. She'd known this moment would come eventually, when her targets realized they were being hunted and decided to fight back. The game had changed from offense to survival, but her mission remained the same. Her teammates were already dead, murdered for doing their duty and serving their country. The people responsible were still out there, still stealing and killing, still betraying everything they'd sworn to protect. Sarah checked her weapons, reviewed her escape routes, and prepared for the final phase of her war. The Patriot Fund had made one crucial mistake when they'd targeted her team. They'd assumed that killing soldiers would end the threat to their operations. Instead, they'd created an enemy who understood their methods, knew their weaknesses, and had nothing left to lose. The hunt would continue until justice was served, or until Sarah joined her teammates in Arlington's eternal ranks. Either way, the men and women who died protecting American interests would finally have the vengeance they deserved. In the shadows of democracy, the real war for freedom was just beginning.